My name is Tom Shadyac. I'm the director of this little film called Liar Liar, and come, walk with me. I can't help but, as a director, literally my heart starts to pound a little bit because it reminds me of the preview process that we do on these films, and you never quite know if a movie's going to work or not. And that logo comes up, and you're in a room full of people, and you get to see if you're going to get laughs or not, going to get another job or not. So, oh, and this was the first time I think the Imagine logo was placed on a movie. So Brian Grazier, Ron Howard, we are honored. Obviously, this film is a different film for Jim Carrey, and the music choice here, we wanted to ease the audience into the movie and say this is going to be a little different Jim Carrey film. I did Ace Ventura, of course, with Jim, and we literally had the guy kicking a box, in the now infamous UPS scene. And it said comedy, crazy comedy right away. And this movie, we wanted to tell the people, the audience, we're easing you into a little different film, a little more reality-based film, hence the music choice, to go a little easier. And again, a little more reality-based here, a little easier beginning with this first classroom scene. And by the way, Max, played by Justin Cooper, was a real great find for us. I'll talk more about him later. There, you see, we made a choice. We used Chris Darden. We normally wouldn't do that because I think it throws the audience normally out of sort of the reality of the film to have someone from real life just pop in. We sort of create movie worlds and try to get people in those movie worlds. But this time we thought it'd be fun to have Chris because of the whole O.J. Simpson slide. And also because there was another scene before this which was a huge, huge edit for us. Jim had a long courtroom scene where we established the character, where Jim spun a tale about how an old man the true story was an old man was mugged at a UPS machine, I'm back to Ace Ventura, an ATM machine, and Jim spun this whole tale of lies. The Randall Tex Cobb character was the character who mugged him, and it established the character, but the scene was about a 4-minute long scene, very reminiscent of the O.J. trial, at least in our opinions, and we decided to cut it because it really prolonged the first act of the movie, and we felt that I guess we had to get to our hook a little quicker. Again, it was a Jim Carrey film. We didn't want the audience to bite more, to take too big of a bite in terms of the comedy that they've come to expect from Jim. Uh-oh. You found the claw. This scene, the claw, is something that Jim and I really wanted to find some things that would be very specific for Jim in creating this character, Fletcher Reed. And the claw was something that Jim's dad used to do. And to establish that play, that very specific play, other than, just a hug between a father and the son, Jim wanted to add the claw. Which, again, was something that was really personal to him and I think helped to ground him in his character. Gosh, there's so many things I want to talk about. It's like I have 50 things to say I didn't realize about each scene. This scene was particularly difficult for us because Pasadena was a wonderful place to shoot in terms of location and beauty, but we had a real trouble with planes. Obviously you have to keep your soundtracks as clear as possible. And we even went to the trouble of trying to get the birds out of the area, all in humane ways, by the way. But we were so concerned about that sound being a problem, and it ended up to be airplanes that buzzed overhead. And, comedy is the kind of thing that happens, once in a great while. And when it happens, you want to make sure you get it. You don't want to miss a comedy take because someone was making a noise or there was a noise overhead or something went wrong with the camera, because you'll never be able to recreate it. And so we all got real frustrated on this day, Jim, me, everybody, because this actually took a few days to shoot and kind of drove us crazy.
Sure. Come on then. I forgot the boyfriend was moving.
Jerry, his name is...
Maura Tierney we chose, and for many reasons, mainly because she was so grounding for Jim. She's a really solid actress. It's very hard to find a comedic actress who can give you the grounding and also deliver the comedy. And Maura, for me, was one of those rare finds. I fought it at first because I wasn't aware of the work that she'd done, and I'd seen her a little bit on news radio, and I was hoping maybe to surround Jim with all respect intended here, more, or no disrespect, I should say, intended. A little, I guess, more of a name, and Maura's, was just coming off of one of her first features, I believe, with Richard Gere and Primal Fear. So I fought it a little bit, but after seeing her a couple times, and I think I have an angel over my shoulder, because the decision to hire her was a tremendously good one for me, and I think the film. This is Amanda Donahoe, who I ended up casting by tape, actually, to play this role. I had seen a lot of actresses, and due to some availabilities and some inavailabilities, we really got down to crunch time. And Amanda, of course, has an English accent. I don't know if most people know that. So I was a little concerned about that, but I think she cleaned it up great and really came in for that real cold, steely, instant read kind of a boss that we needed in this. Here we're going to see a little shock cut here. Yeah, Sherry O'Terry, who was a player on Saturday Night Live. And again, this is a sort of question of tone. I know it is an extreme hairstyle, and it's an extreme, little bit bigger choice than some of the ones we wanted to make in the beginning of the film to really ground it. But my hairstylist, Beth, showed me this hairstyle, and we just said, we got to go with it. It was cute and funny, and Sherry was incredibly cooperative. I think it was her first film, and she just came in and did a great job. This scene here, it seems like such a simple scene, a little walk and talk, but as you can see, everything is timed. The walk, it took us like 25 takes to get that right, and comedy is so much about timing. I'm a real fanatic for rhythm. Comedy, again, a split second later and a joke isn't funny, a little too loud, a little too soft. And so we really work on timing on walk and talks and things like that. This is Anne Haney, who, again, I'm going to say the word grounding about 6,000 times in this, on this tape, because it was so important to ground this movie in a reality base, because, Jim had been so much in left field. We sort of launched this rocket ship a few years ago with Ace Ventura, and Jim was getting bigger and bigger and bigger and having more and more fun with the parts, and he should, because that's his strength. But for him to go into areas, broader areas, the roles like Tom Hanks or Robin, or he's a big fan of Jimmy Stewart's. We really had to ground the movie. And so, again, the choice to cast Anne Haney, who, had done a great film with Robin Williams, Mrs. Doubtfire, and she's just such a solid performer. It's a great comfort for a director to get someone like her, especially a young director like me, and I mean young in terms of experience. I'm 38. I don't know how that fits on the sort of in the middle scale now, on the chronology scale. But she was so good, and I knew that every time I turned the camera on her, she was going to nail it within 3 to 4 takes, and we could move on. So she really gave Jim that freedom to go and just. We like freedom when we're on the set. And whenever Jim feels secure around another actor, he has the freedom to experiment and can come up with, all kinds of stuff, because Jim is always coming up with spontaneous stuff. Even though we write together, Jim and I have a process where we'll go over the script word by word, every word together before we go in and do it. So there already has been a pass with Jim for his particular voice, and it is very specific. Some things another actor can say just don't sound right coming out of Jim's mouth. But Jim will still come up with spontaneous stuff. I'll point some out as we go along. He's a very specific actor and works really, 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 really hard. How was that, Jim? This scene here has nothing special in it at all. I have nothing to say about this scene. actually. No, this is actually a scene. One of the problems we had in the movie was a pacing of the first act, because if you've seen the film before, you know that the comedy hook doesn't take place till about 20 some odd minutes in the movie, 23, 24 minutes in the movie. And, there's a lot of information, a lot of exposition, a lot of setting up the characters, and that is really scary for someone like me who's my first two films, Ace Ventura and Nutty Professor, started out with, these really, excuse me for blowing smoke, but they were sort of explosive comedy scenes. Whether you found them funny or not is obviously subjective, but they started out with a comedic energy right away. The hamster scene in The Nutty Professor, and in Ace Ventura, kicking the UPS box. And this was 20 minutes of setting up characters. So Jim and I were both a little nervous about this. So we ended up shortening the first act. Again, I told you about the first courtroom scene. We shortened that scene with Cary Elwes and Maura, setting up the whole Boston thing. And how to play Cary's part was something we struggled with even while making the movie. How exactly we wanted the audience to respond. Is it going to be a credible choice for Audrey, or was it going to be a choice we knew immediately that we didn't want Audrey to be with? We decided on that, obviously the latter choice. But we never wanted to play the Cary Elwes choice funny. Now this, for example, by the way, is a scene. Brian Grazer was on the set here, and he just tapped at me, and it wasn't written to Jim Birth, the present, and he said, I wonder what Jim would do with his own kid. Jim has a daughter. So I said, Jim, Brian's kind of hinting that we should have a little more fun with this scene. What do you think we should do here? And Jim thought for 1 second, and he turned around and goes, let me try something. And I can see the light bulb go off in Jim's head now. I know how to read that. And I told the guys to be prepared, the camera guys, because you never know what Jim's going to do. And there he birthed the present. And again, it's little specific moments like that Jim comes up with that take material from me and make them really come alive and jump off the page. And again, this is obviously more storytelling. We had a question in the screenings of how many times we want Max disappointed, and I think I probably got a little excessive. I think a lot of us tend to underestimate an audience in the writing process. And then as I direct and I screen it, I realize, oh my gosh, the audience was way ahead of me. The audience is usually ahead, and the screening process is catching up to how far ahead of you they are. And I actually would have probably cut more out of this first act. I'm a real, when in doubt, leave it out is my philosophy. But there were some continuity and some informational problems. I had to keep certain things in. But I think in overall, if I can get my insecure comedy side out of it, that I think it actually does help the movie. Some of the emotional payoff later in the movie is helped by some of the setup.
Something's come up. And
this is just a tip I learned as an acting teacher. Two actors standing there talking is a real, it can be real stiff. And we were having a little stiffness in the scene. We put a coffee cup in Jim's hand, and boom, it comes to life. They say there's no such thing as a bad actor with a sandwich. It's because, not to get too basic here, but an actor doing isn't, is an actor living and being, and it's just pretty amazing how a little coffee cup can just really free an actor up. This is Jennifer Tilly, another. I want to thank that angel over my shoulder for this choice, because she came in very early, nailed the role in the reading, and I didn't cast her right away. And it's because I think, because I'm young and inexperienced, that I like to see everybody, usually for a role. Are there any other options? I want to know them all. But she had it from the very beginning, and it took me about 2 months to hire her, and thank God she was still available, because, again, she has the ability to play a grounded character yet still have enough fun with it, that I think it's just a big bonus for us. And, she's obviously an Academy Award nominee, and don't let that voice fool you, folks. She is the sharpest, smartest, most intelligent actress. I learned a lot from her, and the questions she would ask were incredibly perceptive. And I still have the duh look on my face I can remember from trying to answer some of them. again, this is still setting up the character. Even as I talk about it, sometimes I think we all got a little excessive. But it's not just setting up the character. This also sets up the court case, which is coming ahead, But I can still, even as I'm talking about it now, I can feel the little tensions I have, the insecurity I have about, always wanting to make sure the audience is getting what they expect from a Jim Carrey film, at least at this point in his career. That Jim had bred such a high expectation. His success almost was a bit of a curse, too, because his extreme success and his extreme ability to make people laugh bred an expectation that if you didn't fulfill, you could feel tangibly in a theater that people were just waiting to have that gut-wrenching laugh. So things like character setups and story setups became more difficult for us at this point, I think in Jim's career. But I think this film did give a nice blend of both. That was the potential that we saw going into it, that it paid off Jim's comedic voice. It really worked for his audience. It was going to give him a lot of broad choices because he was under a curse. But it also started to feed into the reality base, the more human characters that Jim has always wanted to play. Now, this is another example of something Jim came up with. They're kissing. Actually, I think it's coming up later where she bites him and pulls his lip across, but that's another moment that Jim came up with. No, maybe it is right here. I haven't seen this film in a while. Yeah, this is right here. Yeah, and Amanda would not bite his lip. Jim is like incredibly flexible. He can bend like a pretzel, and people think they're going to snap him like a twig, but Jim was constantly saying, no, Amanda, harder, bite me. And so finally in the last take there, she really bit him and yanked his lip, and it stretched like only Jim Carrey's lip can.
Well, why not?
Well, because of Max.
Oh, but he'll love it there. I'm going to take him.
This was another scene where, again, expositional. We're setting up this Boston hook. The movie actually ended in script form different when Jim and I got a hold of it. They were talking about going to Boston. It wasn't actually come this weekend. We wanted to heighten the ending of the movie and have Jim and I both got the same vision for Jim chasing a plane at the end of the movie to try to stop her from going to Boston, stop his wife and kid. So we changed some of this dialogue here. By the way, all credit due to the writers, Steve and Paul, Steve Mazur and Paul Gay. They wrote a great script. One of the few comedy scripts that Jim and I actually laughed out loud reading. Steve was a lawyer, so some of this stuff comes from personal experience. That claw, again, was... we tailored the script to some personal things for Jim, and that claw, became sort of a character trait throughout the movie. This scene got shortened quite a bit, again, to up the pace. We even tried to lose it at times. Brian Grazer and Karen Cahill over at Imagine felt, and I think rightfully so, that it did suffer in terms of character. And some of the emotional payoff wouldn't be quite as great. Brian has this theory about comedy, which I also agree with, that the best comedies pay off on two levels. Ace Ventura was just a laugh fest. If you got that style of humor and you liked it, it pretty much operated on one level. Let's have a blast. Let's go over the top and have fun. But it didn't operate on an emotional level. And this film, we had hoped would operate on both. And that was what Brian, and I agree now, feels are what the true smash comedies are about. Again, physical things like this we come up with on the set. Her jumping on Jim, pushing Jim that hard. That's all stuff that we get in the room and I'll ask Jim, what do you think? How do we need an ending moment here, or I'll come up with it. And this, of course, is the most important scene for us as storytellers in the movie, because the audience here is either going to buy it or not. There's, when you're dealing with a hook movie, a movie that works on a hook, it's either going to work or not. So at this point in the movie, when I was screening it, I'm thinking, as I'm freaking out, are they going to buy this whole thing? Because Max is about to make a wish, and it's miraculously going to come true. And as writers, you attack it and you say, well, why did it come true? Was it God? Was it an angel? What did he do? Was it a magic candle? And we decided not to answer any of those questions, to just leave it, into the imaginations of the audience. And, most would probably think it was, coming from the heavens, or it just was a angel god, whatever, granting a wish. And if you look at a movie like Big, which was a role model for our movie, I thought Penny Marshall did an amazing job with that movie. Why did the Zoltar machine work? They never tell you. It wasn't plugged in, but why? Where did it come from? Was it, did a wizard make it, give it life? Or they leave that into the imagination, to the audience's imagination. And I think an audience generally will take an eat like that, what we call an eat. They'll eat that. They'll say, okay, we'll go with it. If you give them too many, though, they start to go, oh, come on. This is not in stone, of course. This is just sort of theoretical. By the way, the Justin Cooper gave me the idea for this shot to push into the clock. That little kid who's about 7 years old wants to be a director and is way ahead of his day. So I hope to produce his first film. Push into the clock, he says, and pull out at the Amanda's office. Of course, this is where the movie now takes off comedically. Jim, we've set him up. This whole movie has been about setting up this liar. He lies in his personal life, his professional life, everything, just anything to make it easy for him. And now comes the fun, the comedy of how he's going to have to pay for this, because he's going to obviously be stuck telling the truth. There's a big choice how to play this. I'll probably talk about it in a little bit. How to play this lie, truth-telling from the liar that he was. This scene stars Krista Allen, who is now on a soap, I believe, Days of Our Lives, and has become quite successful. And we had a lot of fun. She has a great sense of humor. Obviously, we needed a girl with a certain physicality, and she let Jim have fun and throw out lines. See, this here at the end is a complete improv from Jim, this mama, and there are many more in the outtake bin in the editing room. And we laughed a lot this day. And it made Jim, again, we were very early. We tried to shoot this in sequence because we didn't know. We wanted the freedom of letting Jim's performance evolve, because it was an evolutionary thing. We didn't know how crazy he was going to get, what this Tourette syndrome truth-telling would do to Jim's character. So it costs money, of course, to shoot in sequence, because you're holding sets and holding locations. But we really needed that freedom to see how the performance evolved, because we really played with this. And what choice we made, I started to talk about earlier, was that the truth would be a Tourette syndrome type of thing. It would just spill out of Jim, so he couldn't control it, which we thought would allow Jim more fun physically, and also would give him what we found a very crucial thing to the comedy, which was Jim's reaction after the truth-telling, which was the, oh my gosh, did I say that moment? I can't believe I said that moment, which, of course, each time we tried to make a little different than the one before. So you can see, just look at this, see how he, right there, is a very important moment to the reality of the character, because the Tourette syndrome is like the Ace Ventura coming out of him. He can't control it. But the reality base, again, is that character saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. The recourse. This is a moment where Jim came over to me and said, the script says, to show you how Jim Carrey works, the script says, okay, Fletcher Reed is about to articulate his case, but begins gasping like a fish and can't say the truth. So this is a kind of moment that Jim will take and do 5 minutes of improv on. He came over to me and he said, let me just see what I can do on this final take. So Jim did a 5-minute take of gasping, of weird sounds, of physical grunts and groans, and vocal grunts and groans, I should say, and physicalizing the effort. And we laughed so hard after that 5 minutes. If you look really closely, you can see the background characters starting to break up in certain scenes, because Jim cracks people up a lot on the set. Swoozie Kurtz was great in this role, and I'll tell you more about her character as the script goes on, or as the film goes on. I had to cut a crucial scene of hers, and we ended up inserting it into the courtroom. And I think it helped the pace of the case. But she came in and did a great job for us. Again, grounding it. I hired her because she's a grounded actress. What a lot of actors want to do is come in and be funny with Jim, and it's completely, in my opinion, the wrong choice. Jim, at least in these movies, the Liar, Liar, Ace Ventura, people should try to be as real around Jim as possible and let Jim, sort of like the wall. Jim is the Super Ball that you throw against the wall. And these actors, rather than trying to be funny, I've always felt that we needed to surround him with very solid choices. And Jim has agreed. I think Jim is hysterical and is even funnier when he's surrounded by real people reacting to his insanity.
But I'm still waiting to hear good cause. Now, do you have one or not?
See, all these reactions you're seeing is Jim fighting the truth-telling. And again, I was proud of Jim's performance because if you look at them, they are different. Each one is different. We tried to choose and go for a different reaction each time. See, here we're getting kind of big. It may be a little bigger than what we had wanted to do at this point in the film. But again, because it was truth Tourette's, that Jim couldn't control himself, it gave us a freedom to let Jim's character have the fun that, I think a Jim Carrey film should have. And watch Jennifer Tilly in the background of all these scenes. She's always working, even though it may be a, quote, Jim's moment. This is another thing Jim just comes up with, frustrated. And you look at that face, it makes me laugh. And again, it could be going too far too early. But again, because it's truth Tourette's, that choice allowed us to do all this and to, out here, this is just a primal, truthful, frustrated moan. That's at least, my way of explaining it. This, again, is another Jim Carrey moment. We both wanted to do a film without flatulence in the, no flatulence humor, but we couldn't quite grow up that fast. So Jim came up with this moment. He said, I don't think we should do it because we want to, we both thought about not doing it because, let's try to be above that. But it turned out to be in the trailer because it was as funny a moment as probably exists in the movie. So this is a scene, of course, that gives Jim a tremendous opportunity to be flexible. Again, one of those scenes in the script that you'll read that says, Jim tries to call the pen, tries to lie and call the pen red when it's blue, and he struggles with that. That's all it will say in the script, but, we get on the set, and I know that Jim's going to come up with some stuff. And we talk about it in pre-production a little bit, but mostly we get out there and we figure it out on the day, and Jim really gets creative and comes up with all this physical stuff. To me, Jim is the most gifted physical comic of our generation. I think we'd all be real hard-pressed to find somebody as physically gifted as him. He has the double-jointed everything. Every sinew stretches in a way that I don't think the anatomical textbook says it should, but I think that's part of his God-given gift. So all this stuff, again, clearing the desk with the arm, the physicalization, it's all improv stuff. Improv, we go over it in our heads, and so we know what we're doing. And can at least cover it camera-wise. This scene beat him up pretty good. By the end of the day, Jim's arm was bruised up. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, even though he does have the gift of double-jointedness and bending in wild directions, he still bruises like anybody else. So this beats him up pretty good. Jim, obviously there's the money issue with Jim because he makes, he's at the top of the profession in terms of the money he earns. But when you go to work with him, you see how hard he works. And, of course, it's a pure question of economics because his movies are making money. You see how hard he works. And, boy, you could never fault him for a lack of effort. I think Joel Schumacher said about Jim that he was the most prepared actor that he'd ever worked with. And I would tend to agree with that. He comes to the set with ideas and his dialogue is memorized and to the point where he's trying to, change it to keep it fresh.
Okay. Mr. Reed, Reuben and Dunn called. They need to know where the Darvish settlement offer stands.
I just proposed a settlement to dick with them.
Okay, again, this Talbot, this physicalization about the that moment, the recoil, is, again, a way that we wanted to show that the character was struggling with this thing, because if you suddenly told the truth, you certainly would be trying to fight it if you couldn't control what was coming out of your mouth.
Oh, such a shit.
This is turning out to be a Jim Carrey love fest, isn't it?
Hello?
Audrey?
Fletcher, hi. Are you still picking Max up from school today?
Here's the thing. I really can't. I had a case I was certain would...
So here in this scene, obviously, the personal and
It's true.
professional life, the conflicts are beginning to catch up with Jim, and he's finally telling the
The
truth.
last minute, right?
Yes, but this time it's different.
I see. And how is that?
Now I'm telling the truth.
And last night you weren't.
No.
Little moments you'll see coming up where Jim hits his head here with the phone. You know, those hurt. Again, they're all stuff that Jim comes up with. I don't want to leave the listeners with the impression that people sometimes think that Jim doesn't have scripts, that he just shows up and we say, okay, Jim, be funny. The scripts are actually pretty good. It's just those specifications, those moments, hitting the head with the phone, or the other things I've pointed out that Jim will come up with that will make an already good moment even better. Again, now we're continuing to track with the family story here about Boston, and
No, Max, he's not.
these two. I was struck by how much they looked alike. I really think that Justin looks like Moore's kid. They really have some similar, physical features that really helped me to believe, and I think helped an audience believe that they were mother and child.
I have something important I want to talk to you about, okay?
Justin, I thought I would look at 3,000 kids. Justin was actually about the 10th kid I looked at. And breaking a rule, which I like to look at everything, he struck me as such a precocious, great little actor that I brought him right over to Jim's house, and Jim fell in love with him, and we chose him fairly quickly. Again, that angel over my shoulder. Again, this is something we came up with on the set to have the phone that broken up because Jim drove it across the room. It gave Jim a chance to have some fun. With Jim's philosophy, which he taught me, is always try to do it differently. If you have a comedy moment and you've seen it before, then try to do it differently. His role model for a while was Steve Martin. Steve had a moment in, I believe it was Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, that Jim points out as being a moment that he's sure Steve came up with to make it different. Steve was lighting a cigarette and was going to hand another cigarette to another character. And rather than lighting two cigarettes, Steve took a cigarette, lit one end, turned it around, lit the other end, broke the cigarette in half, and handed one half to the woman and kept one half for himself. That's a moment that Jim is quite certain, Steve came up with on the set or in a rewrite process, and it makes that moment special and unique. Jim and I try to go after that all the time. What can we do that's different? And we'll do, like I said, we ran a lot of film on this movie. We wanted to be very experimental because it was a new film, new style film for Jim. We weren't sure where the performance was going to, how it was going to all cut together, so we wanted a lot of options. And Jim's the kind of guy that will give us 15 takes, wanting to do 15 takes, and have the freedom on each take to try things. That creates a freedom. Again, comics need freedom. They need the freedom to fail. In refining jokes, these guys were all stand-up comics. Robin and Jim and Billy Crystal. They, in refining jokes, they have gone through the process of telling a joke and it's flat, and then trimming a word or saying it with a little different punchline. They know that comedy takes time, and again, when it hits, when it's funny, it's funny. But they need that freedom to experiment with what's not funny before they can get to what's funny. And Jim is really great about experimenting.
Hold on, wait.
He doesn't mind, a moment failing, because we'll try it again and we'll eventually make it funny.
Right there. I'll be right over. And here's the crazy part. I actually wait.
Again, this was the nightmare of the sound in Pasadena on this particular day.
Where's your car?
We just hit it at a bad time, and it was really tough to get a Steadicam shot there and not have sound. I just can't stand looping because I think the looping kills comedy, especially spontaneous moments. The truth is it's not spontaneous; it's a loop. So I think I think an audience, even though they may not be able to articulate it, knows. And anytime you have an audience straining in any way to listen, to hear, figure something out, I think it takes something away from the humor. This was, again, one of those nightmare scenes that we all had a real hard time with. This light little comedy called Liar Liar it got stressful at times. This was, again, we were buzzed by planes. And my DP, Russell Boyd, loves to throw silks up. This was the biggest silk I think he'd ever used. It was a 60 by 60 silk overhead. If you look in the background, not to give away trade secrets, you can actually see the shadow of the silk in the background. Russell likes to even the light out, and it looks beautiful. I think he did a fantastic job, but we had to hang a 60-foot silk, which the wind would, it was anchored to a metal roof, a corrugated metal roof, and it would creak, and we had planes and creaking, and everybody got real frustrated on this day. It was kind of tough. And Jim's character, Jim couldn't just start from ground zero each day. This character was going through the worst day of his whole life, so by this point, Jim's already had, several hours of this truth-telling, in character. So he has to come to this frustrated place, and it was a tough thing for him to do. It's not something that an actor can just turn off and on. At least it's not Jim's technique. Jim has to work up and get there. So the performance got more and more draining on Jim as we went.
But it matters to Max. Everything you do matters to Max, and everything you don't.
All right, now let me tell you something. I'm a bad father.
Now, this was something that we played with in editing. Again, Jim gave us 10 choices on that, bigger. We ended up going with a little more subtle choice. And I think it was the right choice. Jim actually wanted to make a more subtle choice here, and I think it was a good choice because... Again, it's just the first. It's one of the first onions peeling away about that he is a bad father.
We are leaving tonight.
I by the way, I would remiss to not mention my editor. I work with a guy named Don Zimmerman. I talk about surrounding Jim with reality-based characters and great actors. I also, as a director, have to surround myself with the best crew members possible, because a film really is a collaborative process. I know we directors get to stick our name in front of the title, a Tom Shadyac film, but it's really so much more. So many people go into making a film like this, and I, for one, have an editor named Don Zimmerman, who has worked with some of the great movie makers of all time, Hal Ashby, and he's done films like Being There and Heaven Can Wait and Prince of Tides and Coming Home, and he has the range to do comedies like Ace Ventura and The Nutty Professor and Roxanne with Steve Martin, and he has been a really tutorial voice in my career, and he's going to do my next one with me with Robin Williams, and his signature is on all these films. He works with me in pre-production. He helps me with character, performance, storytelling. He also believes when in doubt, leave it out. We try to be lean and mean on these movies, and a lot of what you see is the rather brilliant. He's known as the fix-it man in Hollywood because he can fix just about anything, and he's helped me out of many, many, many jams. So, to any aspiring directors, get the best editor you can. Obviously, you write in post-production. You're writing. You're in there in the editing room and you're writing. A moment doesn't work. You got to rewrite it. So you got to take another piece from you got to cut it out. You got to redo dialogue. It can be it's one of my favorite parts of the movie making process is editing, because you really get to rewrite things, to see what works, and to make those moments even better, and to cut out what doesn't work and get rid of fat. And I just love the editing process. It's really exciting for me. Plus, you don't have to work 27 hours a day like you do during production. This scene, of course, was doubly challenging because we've got a ton of kids. You can see them in the background. Kids, there's protective laws for children, as there should be. So you can only work them a certain amount of hours, and obviously we're trying to keep a schedule. So these kids, we brought them in shifts, actually, I think is what we did. A certain group would come in, in the morning, and a certain group would come in the afternoon to try to extend our day. This was an area, again, where we shortened in the film. We had Jim telling the truth to a whole a whole group of kids, kids asking questions like, does a tooth fairy exist? Is Santa Claus real? And we didn't want to break those myths for kids for one reason. And again, it was a pacing question. We wanted to really up the pace of this section of the movie. This, by the way, is one of my favorite scenes of Jim's in the movie. I really think he did a terrific job with this. And there's a big laugh, of course, which we just missed about the kindergarten teacher. That's just what ugly people say. Again, I think he's done a real good job with that scene in setting up, the evolution of the character, how Fletcher is learning about himself and his relationship with his son, and the importance of his son in his life. It's another, I think, misconception that we see reviews written about our comedies and other comedies, and they think that story isn't important to comedy, and it really is. Not saying that we've hit perfect stories with any of our films, but we're really concerned with story. We're really concerned with telling a good, clever story. I actually think Ace Ventura, for example, is a fairly tight story, in terms of a crime-solving story. And we were pretty hard on this story, too, to try the best we could, because it really does take away from comedy if you've got your audience groaning and not believing you. Even though a movie could be very funny, you don't want to take the audience out of it.
I explained this. I have to lie. Everybody lies. Mommy lies. Even the wonderful Jerry lies.
Again, this is, of course, another moment that Fletcher's starting to learn about himself. Trying to peel that onion away. I thought the kindergarten teacher, Marianne Muller-Lively, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Marianne, just did a great job again for us. Small roles. A friend of mine, Steve Odekirk, just did a film called Nothing to Lose, and I just saw the screening the other night, and we talked about how the small roles, how important they are. There are no small roles, really, in a movie, because every one is really important. They create that reality base for you to really be able to use as a springboard for comedy. This is, again, a chunk. If we'd have kept that first scene in the movie of Skull, this character that we'd set up who knocked off an ATM machine, beat up an old man, and Jim came up with a crazy explanation, a big lie for why, what really happened. You would see Skull here. We cut back to the jail originally, and you'd see Skull in jail, getting upset at guards because his lawyer just yelled at him. And we're setting that up for later, which you'll see when Jim goes to the jail. Skull's actually in the same jail cell. We cut all this stuff for pacing. I hired an actor who, Randall Tex Cobb, who is a great actor, and I had the phone. I had to make the phone call that no director wants to make, which is, I hate to say it, but because of the pacing in the earlier, section of the movie, the early part of the movie, we had to lose your scenes, and thank God he lives 3,000 miles away. No, he took it like a pro. It's disappointing, of course, but he was in Ace Ventura, by the way. Randall was the guy that Jim delivered the UPS box to so he could steal his dog, if you remember, from the opening scene of Ace Ventura.
You are incapable of lying.
That's right. I am incapable of lying.
Just for today.
Apparently till 8:15.
Again, we're getting at some information here about the 8:15. It's a 24-hour curse, so we're trying to keep that fresh in the audience's mind.
How ironic.
Again, this is a scene where Jim comes up with stuff of how to physically play this when Greta is trying to ask him a question to see if he really can tell the truth. Greta is asking him a question to see if he really has to tell the truth. All this physicality is all Jim's. The paper, the trying to get a song in his head,
Greta, please.
Now, this is a section of the movie we were starting to get concerned about because Jim has obviously told the truth now, I guess for about 20, 30 minutes, and we don't want to be repetitive. This movie, the challenge of this movie was that it could be a one-joke movie. It could be a one-note joke movie. You think Jim's going to say one thing, but he says something else. So we were concerned at this point in the movie that it was going to get repetitive, and we had to keep thinking of ways to shake it up. I'm not so sure that we succeeded 100% in keeping that recoil moment fresh. Again, it probably was getting old at this point. We tried. We did our damnedest to try to get it. You can see Jim's recoiling there, and maybe a different choice would have been better. It was a real challenge because there were so many recoil moments in the movie, and not till the very end does he ever embrace telling the truth. This character is fighting it all the way. He's a lawyer, and he's going to be a lawyer. He's got the biggest case of his life coming up. So,
Mr. Reed, several years
interesting choice. My set designer, Linda DeSena, who did a great job, also designed this whole office. This whole office was a build. Wanted nothing alive on this set, to sort of heighten the coldness of the environment that Fletcher has worked in. And I added a plant to Greta's. Did not know she made that choice. She kept it kind of to herself, and I added a plant behind Greta in the first scene. But it ended up to be a blessing for us because, by the way, those physical moments that you see there are again Jim coming up with how shocked can I get when I see Amanda. But that plant ended up to be a blessing in disguise because Greta was one of the few things we felt that should have life in this law firm. And as she leaves Fletcher's life, so the life, this green living thing goes out the door with her. So I actually like that we put that plant there. Now this scene is one of my favorites in the movie. We didn't know how it would work at first. We didn't know if it would. You really never know as a comic director or a comic performer which scenes are going to be the ones that are going to be the home runs. You have an idea. This is one I thought we might edit out of the movie. And guess what? I was wrong because it ends up to be one of the funniest scenes in the movie, if not the funniest scene in the movie. There's catharsis going on here, too. I think even an audience member can sense they've always wanted to say something to their boss. And so they get to watch, somebody live that out for them. They get to live vicariously through Jim's performance here. And we wrote a lot of different jokes here to try to keep him, building tension here, obviously, in the beginning of the scene. But we wrote a lot of jokes afterwards to keep... to get him, every law partner should be insulted in some way. And I think we did. We insulted every partner in the room. That's Mitch Ryan playing Mr. Allen. Just a great character actor. And he has such a sense of humor. I was real surprised. He has quite a presence, a very strong presence when you meet him. But he is really adept at comedy. We had a blast doing this scene. It took us about a day to shoot this. There's just, a lot of coverage to do on a scene like this with all the various law partners. And again, Jim did this a million times for us and kept the energy up every time. He is a workhorse, man. This scene has a real rhythm to it. We had to make sure that, I wanted to make sure that Jim really got the rhythm of this. I don't like pauses and gaps in this kind of a performance. And I was really hard on Jim to make sure that this one had a comedic rhythm to it. And again, he improv stuff that didn't end up in the final movie, more jokes. And this toupee thing was an improv. I think we came up with that in rehearsal and decided to throw it in the movie. And if you watch Jim faint here at the end, nobody can quite faint like Jim. Nobody can hit the floor like Jim Carrey. There is a pad under him on this. But Jim's a kind of actor, even if there wasn't, he would still go at it with the same vigor. Now we're coming up to an area of the movie that was the most dangerous for us. because we're going to be in this court for a long time. Scripted, it was some 20-odd pages. You know, we've been building up to this court case.
Afternoon, Consuls. Are we ready to begin?
And now we're about to be here for about 20 minutes, and we were very concerned that it might get old and stale. But we did everything we could to keep it fresh. And again, I think the performances helped to make this work. Our judge is named Jason Bernard, and Jason gave a great performance. And unfortunately, his final performance, Jason passed away the last day of filming of this movie. We all think he gave us a great, great performance. And without his grounding, the courtroom scene that was so dangerous for us wouldn't have been near as fun. His reactions to Jim, I think, are vital to the comedy of this movie. Reactions like Swoozie Kurtz's. If you went through the screening process, which obviously we did as filmmakers, we began to notice that the reactions to the truth-telling were as important as the truth-telling themselves. They carried as much of the comedy as the actual truth-telling itself. So the character actors like Jason Bernard and Swoozie Kurtz get a great deal of credit for the comedy in scenes like this in the courtroom, because without their reactions, it would have not been near as funny.
Your Honor, as you are
This is an example. This is a scene that originally took place off camera between Swoozie Kurtz, the judge, and Fletcher that I ended up cutting and putting into the courtroom here, again for pacing. It was a scene where they were talking about the implications of the case and what evidence she had, and we decided to put it in the courtroom. And I think it did two things for us. It upped the pace of the movie, but it also it gives you more jeopardy when you're playing it in front of the audience, the judge, the court reporters, and whatnot.
Prove that the male voice on that tape is not Mr. Cole himself.
You're such a better lover than my husband.
I mean, if you look at Jason, his reactions are just great. They're just, he's stern. He's in command of the courtroom, but he's kind of going with the ride of this whole show that's been a part of this crazy day of Fletcher, and he just did a wonderful job. And
Well, Mr. Reed, you may proceed.
we were just really blessed to have him. Again, you see Jennifer Tilly in the background, always working. You know, even when we're tight on Jim and she's way far in the background, she's always working like a great actress always will. We're coming up to a scene that was real hard on Jim. It's the beating up in the bathroom. It's the classic Jim Carrey scene on paper where you know Jim's going to have a field day, improving and coming up with moments in that bathroom and is going to deliver something that only he can deliver. But this one truly beat him up. And we cut out several moments because it got a little violent. I mean, Jim is so good at beating himself up that it got a little over the top in terms of violence. And we found it turned off, especially our female audience members. It's interesting. People pointed out, I wasn't even aware of it, was a different slide. What Jim had done in Cable Guy, Jim obviously ventured into a darker comedy there. He had beat someone else up in the bathroom, and people were pointing out that this they thought was Jim's own slide on that scene, his own spoofing that scene where he beats up himself. But that was never a conscious choice. It just ended up that way. He's trying to get out of the court case now, obviously. See, all this stuff, Jim and I walk onto the set, and I wanted as many options for Jim in here as possible. So we designed the set with the sinks and with the radiators and just things that Jim could have fun with. For example, Jim rakes his whole head along this radiator. We cut that out because it was a little violent. But then I'll walk Jim on the set and I'll say, okay, Jim, what are we going to do? And we'll both come up with moments. This got kind of violent here, the toilet thing. We almost cut it out of the movie, but didn't have a way continuity-wise. So we kept it in. That's actually a wooden toilet seat he's beating his own head with. But anyway, Jim will come up with a lot of this stuff. And we only had to do 2 takes of this because Jim nailed it. And it was also nailing Jim. So we only did 2 takes. I mean, if you look at this this throwing himself against the wall. It's really pretty violent. And there's a sound you hear at the end where Jim's head hits the floor. Right there. That was actually Jim's skull hitting the floor. And as Jim says, what's your skull for? But it almost sounded like there should have been mush on the floor after that, because he really hit those tiles pretty hard. But he comes out of it somehow, miraculously.
Your Honor, a desperate fool at the end of his pitiful rope.
What did he look like?
About 6'2", 180.
Again, even watching it again, I realized we're going to be in this courtroom for a very, very long time. So
Yes, sir.
it was a tough one for us as filmmakers, so that it didn't get old and stale. But I think there was enough new information coming at people. I think there had been enough of a build-up up to this point that most people went with it. You know, how is he going to interrogate a witness? How is he going to present his case?
Feel you can still proceed.
Here, of course, he's hanging himself because the judge asks him a question to which poor little Jim can only tell the truth. So I love little moments like that. You know, you can see the buildup of frustration in Jim. Jim's really a good actor. He's not just all, physicality and wackiness. He's a really good actor. And I love little moments like that. Another improv moment, dropping the dollar bill in Jim's hand. We want him to get as low as the bum in the opening of the movie, or that we met early in the movie. A lot of phones in this movie, a lot of phone calls, and that's pretty scary as a filmmaker, because there's pretty much nothing less exciting visually than cutting from one phone to the other. But we tried a number of ways to get Max and Audrey, the characters, down at that courtroom, but it never seemed to work for us story-wise. We were never able to devise a way to get them involved in that insanity. So we were stuck with phone calls.
I gotta go now, Max. I'll see you in a couple hours.
Here we're seeing someone we've talked about in the court case setup, which is the character of Kenneth Falk, who is obviously her lover, was her lover. And we had hired an actor named Chip Mayer, who I just thought was terrific in this role. He again played it with a reality base that I really think helped Jim have just a field day and a lot of fun with it. This was a scene that also came down, got much shorter. Jim, as you can see, starts to struggle with the truth telling here again, and it actually makes him sick. Again, we're trying to descend Jim's character into hell. And it ends up with him throwing up in this scene, but it got a little dark, so we cut it here very early. The character, Amanda Donahoe, and Mitch Ryan's character show up in this scene, and Jim is throwing up here, and we decided to cut it. And, Mitch Ryan says, a little pre-courtroom jitters, huh? Used to get them myself. But see, this is the lead in here for Jim to begin to get so sick that he actually throws up. And it just got too gross. It kind of turned audiences off. So we dissolve here. You'll see we just dissolve right from here into the courtroom. Again, it upped the pace of this whole very lengthy section. It was actually my editor's son's idea, Dean. I believe it was Dean Zimmerman's idea. And I like to take ideas from everybody and anybody. If craft service has an idea, I'm willing to entertain it. And we've had some good ideas from a lot of very unlikely places on the movies I've done.
Kenneth Falk.
This moment worked, that moment where Jim gets sick, it worked independently, we found, of Jim throwing up outside. It's actually an extension of Jim throwing up outside, but it worked independently, so we kept it in the movie.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
One problem we had in this courtroom scene was the bailiff swears in the Kenneth Falk character, but never swears in Jennifer Tilly's character. So we screened it and hoped an audience wouldn't pick it up, and I think we got one card out of about 700 that said, how come he didn't swear in Jennifer Tilly's character? We cut it for pace. It was also, there was a joke on the end that didn't work, and so we cut it out. And so we know it's a little inconsistency, but we decided to keep it.
Isn't it true that your relationship with my client is entirely platonic? I object, Your Honor!
These moments where Jim objects to himself are a couple of my favorite moments because, again, it was a way of telling the truth in a different way. Remember, I said it could be a one-note joke movie. Jim actually gets a chance to object to himself, which is another way of him telling the truth. He lies. He actually does get a lie out, but he has to object to himself. We came up with that as we were polishing up the script. And I thought it really helped here in the courtroom, again, to tell that same joke a different way. See, those two characters just show up in the scene. They were supposed to show up in the scene before, but the audience seemed to go with it.
Did you ever not make lie?
I actually love this performance of Jim's here. I think he has a lot of fun with this, and just this whole idea always struck me as funny, a lawyer badgering his own witness and doing himself in.
You stuffed her like a Thanksgiving turkey!
All right, it's true, okay? I humped her brains out. There, now you happy?
When I first saw this moment between these two, on the first screening, my editor showed me shortly after he'd cut the movie. I just love this. I love the idea of a lawyer hanging himself here. Jim, of course, improvs that moment, slams his head against the desk, and we ended up padding it, but the first time he just slammed his head against the desk. He had a similar moment in Ace Ventura in the insane asylum when he was playing the crazy guy dressed in a tutu at the insane asylum and slams his head into a bench, and you would swear that Jim would smash his skull, but somehow he comes out of it unscathed. This just happened. The paper stuck to Jim's head, and it gave us a laugh, so we decided to keep it in the movie, and we ended up putting a little stickum on that paper to keep it consistent, but it just happened on a sweaty forehead. It stuck, and we kept it in.
A 31-year-old divorcee on welfare because my scumbag attorney had a sudden attack of conscience.
Here comes the big light bulb moment in the movie, where Jim figures out how he can win the case by telling the truth.
I have no choice but to rule in favor of...
Your Honor! I call Samantha Cole to the stand.
Order.
This, again, is a Jim moment, improv moment, to knock it off, which I love, right there.
Mr. Reed, it is out of sheer
Here, Jason's had just about enough.
freak show to continue.
But curiosity, he's got to see what the heck this guy's going to do. I just thought Jason was great. I think he left us with a great performance as his final performance, and I'm very thankful for it. So she's not sworn in. Okay. I already told you. I hope the audience eats that one.
Is this a copy of your driver's license?
Yes.
It says here you're a blonde, are you? If you don't remember, perhaps Mr. Falk will.
Brunette.
We can play the tape again. Maybe it's on there.
Some of this interchange between Jim and the Swoozie Kurtz character was also in that previous scene I told you we cut from the movie. We decided to place it here in the courtroom. Right here, this stuff. It actually gave us, I think, the funniest outtake at the end of the movie when I went up to... Jim wanted to try some different stuff, so I went up to Swoozie and told him to call him an overactor. And it broke us all up. Jim's got a great sense of humor about that. We have a lot of fun with that reputation of his.
Certificate under date of birth.
Your Honor, I object. What does this have to do with anything?
Overruled. Mrs. Cole, answer the question.
1965.
We did some research on this and found out that this would be a way for Jim to win the case, that if she was a minor, she would not be able to enter into a legal contract. So I believe the original writers came up with this way to rewrite this scene. He originally won the case in a different way by actually supporting a lie, but in a very clever way. But Jim and I didn't want him to ever support a lie. We didn't think his character could. We think it would convulse and just be unable to do it. He would be unable to do it. So we asked the original guys to see what they could come up with, and they came up with this way. Again, Steve and Paul. Steve was a lawyer and knew the reality of entering into a prenuptial agreement. Jordan fades back. Swish. That's all Jim, having fun on the set. We didn't know if we were going to keep these claps in or not. How far do you go, and is it going over the top with your tone? And we actually found audiences clapping with them, so we decided to keep it in. And what we'll do is we'll get options. We'll do it once with the audience clapping and once without it. So with comedy, I like to make sure that I'm covered. If a moment doesn't work, make sure we cover ourselves and get it another way. So I learned that very early in the Ace Ventura film, which was my first film. I'd done a student film and a movie of the week before that. And I learned that editing is about options, giving yourself options. Comedy editing, you really want to make sure you can have different choices in the editing room. It's probably a little excessive on this film. I shot tons of film. Kodak has my bust in their corporate headquarters. I shot so many hundreds of thousands of feet of film on this. But it is true that film is the cheapest. It's the cheapest cost you've got pretty much on a movie. So if you're going to be excessive in an area, you might as well, make sure you've got it. And on this one, I went a little far with that. But I think we did get quite a performance by going the extra mile in terms of takes. Here we can see that the Jim is reaching his bottom. His character is finally realizing, what a shit he is and what a shit he's been. So he just can't quite live with it anymore. So it's a tough place to go. Jim and I saw this at first, and we're a little scared of it because it's a tough place to go for a comic, who's always using laughter as his crutch. And here, this is some, real emotion that we have to hope the audience goes with, and it's scary for us as comic performers. And when we've hit such comedy highs, we're always afraid that people are going to walk out and go, come on. But we think the majority of the audience, went with this character turn, and the levels of this movie, we wanted it to be touching and funny, so we all think we were fairly successful. It's all subjective, of course, but we think we were pretty successful at reaching those emotional levels and balancing it with comedy. Yeah, I remember when I first saw this scene in the cutting room and Don showed me the film, and I was surprised at how well it worked for me, being a guy who always leans on comedy and always wants to be laughing in a film like this. It actually got me. And so I let it exist in more of its raw state. I didn't cut it down and didn't want to cut it down. And Brian Grazer, I'd imagine, didn't want to cut it down, and neither did Karen. Even though we were afraid of it, that moment there, I was, we're all afraid of that moment because Jim is intense, and it is a big moment the other way. But we all felt it worked. We felt it was important too to the storytelling and to this character. He's gone so far comedically, and this is his big character moment. Where he really understands things about his life and his profession, what he's made of his profession. So we left it in. Now, again, remember in this scene, we cut a bit out. We wanted to up the pace of this movie quite a bit in the end. We do this thing in movie making where we screen movies and we look at the scores of audiences, and we actually upped our score quite significantly. It was already a pretty solid score, but we upped it quite significantly by upping the ending pace of the movie. This, again, you're going to see when we go back into the jail cell, you'll see the Randall Tex Cobb character. Now, nobody notices him, of course, but he was there because of the beginning of the movie, and that he actually beats Jim up in the in the jail, but we cut all that. We needed to get to the ending. You know, the audience, I think, again, was ahead of us. There he is in bed, Randall Tex Cobb.
Have you been sexually molested yet? Because I could circle
The only line in the movie, Anne, God bless her, had a little trouble with. I think she nailed it there on that take, but she, by her own admission, couldn't quite hit that one.
You need a job?
I don't think you can afford me.
So this now is a matter of just getting Fletcher to that airport and getting to the ending of the movie. There were other scenes here, things that brought it to a more emotional place between Max and Audrey. And we found, again, through screening, that if we just make this ending a rocket ship, we can still pay it off emotionally, but the audience is more appreciative of the pacing here.
Take everything! But it's not gonna make you happy!
I think at this point in my career, too, I'm still a little bit of a nervous filmmaker, you know. I may be a little too concerned about the audience's reaction. But I hope that'll, more freedom and will come with maturity. I really do cut a lot of stuff out. I cut a lot of stuff out. They call me Shady Hack. That's my name in the cutting room. My given name, and they got me a little axe, which is called the Shady Hack axe. When the movie's slow, they know I'm going to take out that axe and up the pace. There was a question, again, I said it earlier, of how to play this Cary Elwes character. Everyone's temptation is to try to be funny with Jim, but and Cary's a really good friend of Jim, so he really wanted to get in there and maybe make this character, more over the top and funny, like Jim's character is humorous. But Jim and I both didn't want to make that choice. We wanted Cary to play it down, and there is a bit of a gooberness that Cary adds to the character, and that's as far as we wanted to go. Again, because I think Jim will carry the comedy. This one took about 25 takes to get right, just for pacing and getting the rhythms of the scene right. Now, all this airplane stuff is shot on a set. We shot all this stuff for safety reasons on a set, because obviously Jim's going to be chasing this plane here pretty soon, for those of you who've seen the movie. And we used the same special effects guys we used in The Nutty Professor, John Ferret and Robert Stadd. And they did a really great job again for us in creating the it's green screen, for those of you who don't know about green screen, you place green screen in a background, and the computer will later key into that background the green color, and you can then overlay another background. So the computer will remove the green, you can lay in another background. Now, we're actually out at LAX. I was amazed that they let us have this much freedom out there. I got a really great producer who knows how to get people to go the extra mile, Jim Brubaker, and Jim set this whole scene up for us, because I don't know if anybody's filmed this close to airplanes out at LAX. We had a great second unit director, Mickey Gilbert. Again, if my movies have been successful, it's because of people like this that get shots like this. Mickey Gilbert has been second unit directing for years, and amazing shots. You can see the plane going in the background. It's a huge, high production value shot. We're actually out there shooting Jim, and this little stair thing is moving pretty quickly. We have a driver. Mickey's son is driving it underneath to keep it safe for Jim, but truthfully, it was a little dangerous. I didn't want to go that fast with Jim on it, but we looked at a couple of the takes and realized we to create the reality, we had to make it go a little quicker. So here, obviously, we're on a stage. That's a green screen behind Jim, but we comped that background in. That's, again, Mickey out there shooting second unit. This thing was cooking. This thing was really cooking. He had some amazing shots. We upped the pace again at the ending, going with the Shady Hack philosophy, but Mickey got some great shots that really, I think helped the comedy. This little man. Jim called this... what did he call it? Goliath. David against Goliath. The plane being Goliath, and the little Fletcher Reed out there being David.
Chemistry? Whatever it is, we can work on it.
No, no, no. It's just it.
And there he is.
Fletcher.
No, no. This has nothing to do with Fletcher.
It's Fletcher.
Again, this is stuff that we rewrote the ending, and in some ways, I know we went a little over the top here with this airplane ending, but we didn't want to end it, in a soft way. We wanted the threat to Boston to be real, and we wanted to show it by the fact that they were actually leaving. So this actually was one of the scenes where people liked the most, but also liked least on the cards. Some people felt it's going a little bit too far. And those are choices that you just never know when you're going into a movie. You just never know. And it was a choice we made, and we stuck with, obviously, because it did work for a large majority of the audience. Some people are turned off by it, but we stuck with it. It's short enough, we shortened it enough so that it wasn't too big of an offense to people who didn't, really believe that Jim could hijack a flight of stairs. And it is definitely, it definitely turns into sort of an action comedy at this point. Now, there's something coming up here that is really kind of this. First of all, this moment you see Jim is another improv moment. When Jim just comes out of this bag with the strap around his face, and that's the thing where I think Jim does truly earn his money. He gives you comedy, what Jim calls the comedy chasm, where comedy doesn't exist. This is a moment there was no comedy. It says Jim's coming up out of a bag, comedy chasm. Jim comes up with something. There's a very funny face. And line reading, and there you have a laugh where you wouldn't normally have a laugh. Now, once you look in the background of the scene, you're going to see Fire Marshal Bill, okay? Jim and I we were having fun one night, and I challenged Jim to get into into a costume. See him in the background? There he is. Fire Marshal Bill is in the background just over Carrie Elway's shoulder. That's Jim, just to completely bring you audience members out of the reality of this movie. And nobody noticed in every screening. Nobody knows, but there's Jim. For all you movie trivia buffs, he's in the background of that scene.
What were you doing? Are you out of your mind?
No. I'm thinking clear. I've never been this close.
Dad?
Creep.
Again, this was a real hard scene for us. You never want to talk too much at the end of a movie, and both of the last films I've done have been characters giving speeches at the end of movies, which are incredibly dangerous. I am apologizing because I understand this now about my character. In movies, you always want to show, you don't want to say, It's real dangerous to say, but in both movies, we couldn't figure out ways to show it. Maybe my own immaturity as a filmmaker or lack of cleverness, whatever, but I think the speeches ended up working in both of them. We did shorten them, but they were scary. They're scary moments for us comics. Jim has to go pretty deep here emotionally, and
I love you,
it was scary.
and I'll never hurt you again.
But interestingly, a lot of the audience members really enjoyed that.
He's not allowed to lie.
I think on our cards again they break it down by age and category. Mature women loved this scene, between father and son, the apology scene.
We made the wish at 8:15.
And this again, the 8:15 wrapping up the moment. Wrapping up the truth-telling, that 24-hour rule that we set earlier. We actually cut that moment for pacing, and the audience really missed it. And it does belong in the movie.
Do we have to go to Boston?
Again, this was a problem. How to get Jerry's character the heck out of the picture, and it's pretty quick, and we all recognize it's pretty quick. Most of the audience bought it. Jerry's being gracious here and steps aside. And he can see. I mean, Jerry obviously can see that the family has hope again.
Looks like he's got his father back.
How to end this movie was always a big question for us, what to end it on. Jim came up with this scene. Woke up at 3 or 4 in the morning, called me before we were shooting, said, I got the ending scene. And this was the scene he told me. And I wasn't sure it would work for a number of reasons. I think it ends up working, and it's actually one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Of all the scenes when I first saw the movie, this scene got me. I completely lose objectivity, obviously. As a director, you see it 3,000 times, so I have no idea if it's funny, moving, touching, and I rely on the audience to tell me. But this scene I distinctly remember as moving me, these moments between Fletcher and Audrey. And it's a choice, people call it a Hollywood choice because now the parents are going to get back together. It's got a happy ending. But the truth is that Fletcher was changed to the core. And for us, it wasn't as fulfilling without Max having his dad back. And we thought, why not? I mean, Fletcher has changed. He will be a good husband now. He will be the best choice for Audrey. So we thought, why not? We went with the Hollywood ending. And again, we're going to call back the claw. And then the outtakes, which people have said have become the Shady Act trademark because I did it in The Nutty Professor. And the truth here and now, which will be told, is that we just wanted to end the movie with more of a laugh on both movies. And we had these extraordinary outtakes from Eddie and from Jim, and that's why they're on. It's as simple as that. We really wanted to end the movie with a laugh. So again, boom, we take them out of an emotional moment and we bring them right back to comedy with this elevator bit with Jim. It's just some of the fun that we have, backstage. Some of it gets a little racy for to be added to the movie. So you can see Jim's always thinking, he's always coming up with stuff, and it's pretty wild working with Jim because you just never know what's going to come out. It's scary and challenging and fun.
Well, it's working. I feel sorry for them already.
Yeah, Jim actually broke a glass in this. The next one, Jim was messing around completely, just for no reason, just having fun. Jim actually, the next time, he broke a glass and came after the character. And God knows what's in Jim's head here. He comes up with origami. I mean, he's just going crazy. But truthfully, I mean, I really just wanted to end the movie with laughs, and as opposed to going back and reshooting something, we came up with a number of scenes to reshoot. To reshooting an ending, making it funny. We decided to just tack these on here, and guys can all see the insanity I live with on a daily basis with this guy.
I'd have got him 10.
Goodbye, Mr. Reed.
No, wait! I didn't understand.
We do, interestingly, sweeten it with laughter because I don't let the crew laugh at Jim most of the time. Sometimes it's just purely involuntary. So Don, my editor, sweetens it with laughter. And it helps to get the audience laughing. It's a bit of a cheat. It's a bit of the old sitcom laugh track. But because this was obviously a genuine laugh, and so is this one, just involuntary. This is when I whispered to Swoozie, call him an overactor.
I object.
You would!
Overactor.
Jazz up!
See, you can see Jim's instinct. He has a great sense of humor about it. It was a it was a real fun moment on the set. Swoozie was afraid Jim was going to fire her or something. She didn't want to say it, but I finally convinced her, and we got a great ending tag moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Liar, Liar, hope you enjoyed it. But get a real job.